So with our hip switches here, we're trying to transition from one leg to the next before the opposite comes off the ground. So right here, I'm going to go with my right foot to the ground. I'm going to rotate my trunk toward my left hip, keeping that right knee on the ground as long as I can as I rotate my left, coming back over to the 90-90 position on the opposite side. And I'm doing a scaled version because I have my hands on the ground. So I'm using my hands to drive rotation of my trunk. Then the right hip comes, the left hip follows, and the idea here is I'm trying to be intentional to get the muscles around my hip to fire, to feel them. So the intent matters with the motion here. So again, hands, and left leg is going to rotate, right leg is going to come through. That's a bear sit in the middle. I'm going to rotate back in that 90-90 position. You're also going to try to pivot onto your toes. So here in a second, hands are going to come off the ground, and we're going to make it a little bit more challenging. But the goal is you're trying to keep your trunk or your torso as vertical as possible, and that's going to drive more and more motion into those hips without compensations in the trunk. As the hands come off the ground, typically we see more and more compensations that happen. So you can scale this by putting like yoga blocks or something under your hands to give you some more range of motion. So as the hands come off the ground, you'll immediately see a little bit more side bending in the torso. When I transition back to the bear sit position here in the middle, you'll see that lower back start to round a little bit more as I'm trying to clear space into my hips. Much more challenging to have the hands off the ground versus having the hands on the ground. And then obviously if you don't have a lot of hip motion, we can go back to the hands being on the ground and we can lean back a little bit further. So my torso is more in line to be parallel with the floor versus perpendicular. That's going to make it a little bit easier. So here you'll see from that front view, starting with the hands off the ground, I'm going to rotate through the left hip as far as I can, then the right hip follows, then I try to get the left hip to the ground as far as I can before the right hip comes back down. And again, quality over quantity with these. When we're working on trying to improving joint capacity, the intent matters. Should not be painful, shouldn't be pinchy. If you're getting some cramping, try to scale off on the muscle recruitment, meaning don't squeeze as hard, and you should reduce some cramping, or you might need to scale it to like a hands version or getting your trunk more parallel to the floor, and that'll help reduce some of the demand and thus lowering the intensity of the movement. So quality over quantity, scale and progress as needed, and that's all going to be dictated by your hips capacity and your motor control.